the masses. This is a plant identification course provided by the Tallgrass Prairie Center. And I would like to just remind everybody of a couple of housekeeping details as we get started. That is, because this meeting is being recorded and it's just basically a presentation by me, I would ask that you mute yourselves so that we don't have background noise during the meeting or any kind of feedback. That would be appreciated. And if you are interested in going back and looking at any parts of the presentation afterward, know it is recorded. It will be posted on the Tallgrass Prairie Center website probably a couple weeks after the presentation is finished, after the closed captioning is done. But in any case, I'm here today to introduce you to some of the unique warm season grasses that I look for when I visit Iowa remnant prairies. The ranges of all these species cross over into other states, so if you're joining us from across the state line, this should still be relevant to you as long as you're in the Tallgrass Prairie region. Just a quick reminder that this is the last in our series. We've had 7 lectures throughout the Grasses for the Masses course. Many of those, I think the first 4 are now available on our website. Watching the other lectures first is a great preparation for today's talk, but it's not essential. If you are joining us for the first time, please do note that I may skim over some information or terminology that you can pick up by going back to the recorded webinars and checking those out. Another reminder is that if you have questions as we go through things, please type them into the chat function of Zoom. And Anne will help me to answer your questions over our botany breaks today. I want to first acknowledge some partners we've had in making this successful. This series was made possible through generous support from the University of Northern Iowa, of which the Tallgrass Prairie Center is a part. We also received additional funding from the Leopold Center and from Practical Farmers of Iowa. We are also grateful to our Green Iowa AmeriCorps service members for their enthusiastic help in organizing the series and in providing technical assistance to us. In the previous 2 lectures in this segment of the course, in the warm season segment that's happened later this summer, you learned how to recognize and identify common warm season grasses of weedy areas and roadside plantings, and also other reconstruction projects. But today, I'm going to zoom in on the warm season grasses you will generally find only in remnant prairies, although sometimes they show up in high quality plantings or in kind of surprising places. I just love visiting remnant prairies. It's one of my favorite things to do. They're a place of solitude and solace for me. I love being immersed in the experience of exploring them, and I get excited about all the life that I find when I just look closely and visit them repeatedly at different times of the year. But I also have a professional interest in remnant prairies. As the plant materials program manager for the Tallgrass Prairie Center, one of my main responsibilities is to produce Iowa source prairie seed that native seed growers can use to start their own production fields. Over 30 years, our program has collected and grown over 100 species of Iowa prairie plants. Native seed growers have produced commercial quantities of nearly 80 of those species. The Iowa DOT and county roadside programs preferentially use certified Iowa source seed, which is marked by a yellow tag for their plantings. You can see a pallet of yellow tag seed at the bottom right of this slide. What's a remnant prairie? Well, I think Justin went over this during the cool season grass lectures, but I'll review it for now. It's one that has not been plowed. It retains most of the native plant community that evolved in that place over the past 8,000 to 10,000 years since the retreat of the last great ice sheets from central Iowa. Remnants are found in places that were set aside, such as cemeteries and roadside rights of way. They're also in places that were just unsuited for growing row crops. These could be places that were too dry or steep, rocky, wet, or just inaccessible to farm for other reasons. Those remnant prairies often found other uses, maybe as pastures or hay meadows. Most of the original tallgrass prairie did not fit into any of these categories, and the landscape of Iowa shows that the conversion of rich prairie soils to row crop farming was nearly total. This map shows one of the places that I often visit. In fact, I was there yesterday. It's just a 3-acre remnant that's adjacent to a pioneer cemetery in Butler County. And you can see it outlined there in red. I'd love it if you go out and find a remnant prairie near you. I've included a screenshot of the Iowa Prairie Network website. They have a tab called About Prairies, and under that you can find this page called Find a Prairie. One link that they didn't include on that page is to the Iowa State Preserve, and so I did include a link on this slide. Remember, this is a recorded lecture, and so you will have access to these resources in the future as well. So what kinds of warm season grasses are you going to find in remnant prairies? Well, even a small remnant is going to have more than 100 native plant species total, and a large remnant often has more than 300 species. These diverse plant communities often host 40 to 60 different species of grasses, about half of which are cool season. Think back to lecture 4 of the first half of the course. And about half of them are warm season. Most of the warm season grasses are currently flowering or setting seed. You can encounter the big 4 warm season grasses that Christine covered in lecture 6 in remnant prairies as well as reconstructions. And in this picture, in fact, you can see big bluestem. But Indian grass, little bluestem, and switchgrass can also be found in remnant prairies. Today, I'm going to focus on some of the less well-known warm season grasses that are generally not found in planted prairies for one reason or another. First grass for the day is prairie dropseed, or Sporobolus heterolepis. This has some other common names, also northern dropseed or just plain bunch grass. The plant grows to about 1 to 3 feet tall and has a very tight tussock-like bunch form. I think I'd call it about the bunchiest of all bunch grasses. And it is currently flowering, and those inflorescences will be obvious through October. Everything about this plant is fine and graceful. The bunches, they arch outward like fountains. The leaves are very, very narrow and elongated, though surprisingly tough and wiry. I'll bet you could make a basket out of this stuff. In winter, the bunches turn golden and they look like somebody dropped a blonde wig on the ground. The stems are smooth, they're mostly hairless, but the ligule is an easily visible tuft of white hairs that's about, whoops, I went a little bit too far there. It's about 2 to 3 millimeters long. The inflorescences of the species grow up and out on graceful stalks. The panicles are symmetrical with kind of a cone-shaped outline. Now, one of the interesting features of this grass is its smell, which, depending on who you ask, is kind of like popcorn or rancid butter, stinky feet, or cilantro. Not all of those are considered pleasant by everyone. The scent is released by scent glands that are along the branches of its panicles. And you can see, I had fun putting this under the microscope and finding that little sticky green spot that produces that smell. Now, when I look at the plants out in the field, I can see it with the naked eye now that I've taken a look at them. The spikelets are single flowered. Here are 2 of the spikelets on this little twisty stalk. You can see the 3 stamens are sticking out of one of those flowers. And on this one, the stamens are still within the floret, but the fuzzy stigmas are out. When mature, the seeds are dark, round, and hard, and they drop from the plant really easily. So it comes by the name drop seed, pretty honestly. Prairie dropseed is found across Iowa in various kinds of prairies and soils. It's primarily in true remnants that do not have a history of severe disturbance. This picture shows large clumps in a beautiful black soil prairie remnant at Bennington Township Cemetery in Black Hawk County. There are 2 really obvious clumps right there, indicated by the obvious purple arrows. The range of prairie dropseed is interesting. It's almost exactly the same as the map of the original extent of the tallgrass prairie. So you can see the bright green are counties that have records of this species. Prairie dropseed has a lot of uses from both humans and wildlife. It is a forage for livestock. I know for a fact that voles really love to burrow and nest in the dense tufts of litter that it produces. And it's fun to watch hoverflies, these little flies that look kind of like a bee, eating the pollen from the stamens of prairie dropseed. Sparrows and other songbirds eat those largish seeds, and Native Americans would roast and grind those seeds into flour. Now the beauty and the adaptability of this plant has been noticed by landscapers, and you can see it planted in rain gardens, flower beds, and even in the median strips on University Avenue in Cedar Falls, Iowa. There really aren't any grasses that look exactly like prairie dropseed, but I thought I'd introduce you to a cousin of it, which is rough dropseed. So it's in the same genus, Sporobolus, but it's a different species, Compositus. This plant is slightly taller than prairie dropseed, and it's just a bit rougher and rangier than that more elegant cousin. The clearest difference between the two is in the inflorescences. Those of rough dropseed remain partly to mostly enclosed within the sheath. They're really kind of pretty to look at, though. If you get close up to them, the actual florets are almost like pearly. Okay, now we're going to key out two plants today, and our first plant of the day is this cute little dark tufty thing with sort of a pinkish halo around it that's growing in a sparse, dry, sandy area. Its tufty look is due to those leaves being mostly basal. They don't grow much up along the stem. When you do look at one of those leaves closely, you'll see that it has long, messy hairs mostly on the leaf sheath, kind of look like hairy leg hairs. But the blades usually only have sparse hairs that are located mostly toward the base. And that ligule is long and hairy and quite prominent. There's the sheath hairs, there's the ligule, and now you can see a measure of those ligule hairs as being 5 to 6 millimeters long. The inflorescence is like the definition of an open, airy panicle. When mature, it falls off as a unit and it rolls with the wind, dispersing the seeds as it goes. There are more tufts of hair at the branches of the inflorescence. So this one just has these just cute little tufts of hair just about everywhere. And then the color scheme of the grass's florets matches the UNI panther colors. The spikelets turn out purple, and then they turn gold as they age. The spikelets themselves are quite long, with 4 to 12 flattened florets in each one of them. And in the picture of this one spikelet, I've bent the glooms back a little so that you can more easily see the number of florets there. So this is our plant of the day, number 1. So here's how you work it through the key in Brown and Elliman. It has a round stem, and the flower branches are arranged all along the stem, not just from one point, either at the top or side. The inflorescence is open and airy, not bunched tightly or fuzzy. The plant simply is not big, and the inflorescence doesn't droop. So that gives us the bottom group down here on page 29, which is known as the hardest group. But don't worry, we'll get through it. The inflorescence is not roundish, bunchy, straight, or narrow. It's the definition of sparse and delicate. So if you follow all of those leads, you'd cross the green ones off the list, and you'd get down here into this list on the purple side. And I bet you would pick Eragrostis and maybe the one right below it, Digitaria, and we'll get to that one more later. But if you picked Eragrostis, you would be right. This is purple lovegrass, or Eragrostis spectabilis. And spectabilis means showy or spectacular. And Eragrostis is from the era in that is from eros, meaning love in Greek. So this is really literally love grass. Another common name for it is tumblegrass. It is a short little plant. It's very bunchy and grows in this low tuft. Even the tops of its panicles are just going to hit maybe 2 feet, and it flowers from July through October. You can find purple lovegrass in dry, open, kind of sparsely vegetated prairies. Its tumbleweed habit helps it to colonize some surprising places like sandy or gravelly roadsides. You probably won't find it where you've got a really dominant grass canopy by the big four grasses, your big bluestem Indian grass, switchgrass, and little bluestem. This purple love grass is not going to like that area. It's not a super common grass throughout the state of Iowa, but it's especially rare in the northwest corner of the state, which we'll see in the range map here. It was kind of hard to find a lot of uses for this plant, but the young foliage is something that livestock can eat. It's a caterpillar host for a skipper butterfly, similar to what Christine highlighted about a lot of the roadside grasses last week. And I think it's absolutely gorgeous when you see a mass of this grass and the light hits it just right. I said it's attractive when planted in mass. I kind of picked a natural planting. The picture at the bottom left there is actually of a cousin of Eragrostis spectabilis. This is sand love grass, and this is in an actual remnant prairie, but just with the light of the sunset hitting the tops of those frothy panicles. Just gorgeous stuff. I think it should be planted in lots of more gardens. So here are some lookalikes. And one of them is a cousin. It's in the same genus. This is I showed you first the purple love grass down low in this image, but up above it, the slightly taller plant is Eragrostis trichodes, or sand love grass. It is about twice as tall as the purple love grass. And in this one, it doesn't act as a tumbleweed. The seeds actually fall off singly off the plant. So later in the season, you'll notice that. Then there's one that is just a dead ringer. Okay, so see, there's low-growing tuft of grass, halo of pink around it, looks just like sand love grass, but it's not, but it grows in the same habitat, so it's super confusing until you look at closely at the inflorescence, and you'll see that it's got single florets at the ends of those panicle branches. So it's quite different when you look closely at it. Even though when you just about step on it, it's going to look about the same as purple love grass. Interestingly, it lives in similar habitats and also acts as a tumbleweed. So they're very, very similar in, not just the way they look, but in the way they act. Okay, our next grass, which we're not going to key, is called marsh muley, or Muhlenbergia racemosa. This one also goes by the names upland wild timothy, or green muley, or just plain muley grass. This is one of the shorter grasses in a tall grass prairie that tends to fill in around taller bunch grasses. So you'll see this one in prairies that have the big four in them, but it's going to fill in the gaps. And it's aided by the fact that its growth habit is sod forming. So it has underground stems called rhizomes that help that patch spread, even though it's within, matrix of other grasses and wildflowers. And this one flowers and sets seed in August to September. You can find it flowering now. When you look at the growth form of marsh muley, you'll notice that the stems are highly branched. So this is not a super common feature of our grasses, that they're highly branched with leaves all up and down that stem. It has this foliage that drapes somewhat, so it kind of gives it this full leafy appearance, and in a light breeze, it almost kind of flutters. The ligule on this is just a shortish membrane, has a little bit of a jagged edge. You can see it there that it's not quite a millimeter long. Okay, let's take a look at its inflorescence. It has a very dense, compact seed head. It's about 1 to 5 inches long. In the first photo on the left, I've spread out the branches of the seed head somewhat to make them easier to see. The spikelets then are bunched together in these irregularly sized groupings. They're not a symmetrical arrangement as you'd see in foxtails or actual timothy grass. Sometimes this is called wild timothy because it has some superficial resemblance to that. It's tricky. You see how densely packed those spikelets are. It's tricky to pick a single spikelet out from the whole mass, but once you find the glooms, it's clear that the spikelets are single flowered. So you can see I've taken the glooms and kind of spread them apart in the right-hand photo. I put this under a dissecting microscope and just took a cell phone picture, go figure. So the glumes are spread apart, and they're slightly longer than the lemmas, and they have that like a little awn at the tip of those glumes as well. And then again, we have the UNI colors. We've got a purple stigma this time and golden stamens. So we're being all about school spirit tonight. Marsh muley can be found in a variety of different prairie habitats. Mostly I see it in mesic prairies or roadside remnants, but it tolerates various soil types and moisture regimes, and some level of disturbance and even shading. So like I said, it can even compete with the big four grasses. It's broadly distributed across the tallgrass prairie and also across the Great Plains and into the southwestern US. Marsh muley is eaten by livestock early in the growing season when the leaves are tender. But I think it's kind of its best value is for wildlife. It forms these dense colonies that provide excellent cover for songbirds and game birds, and it's eaten by a lot of different native insects, which also provide food for those other members of the food chain. And I have a feeling this is really kind of an underutilized species in reconstructed prairies. It is actually a fairly reliable seed producer in production fields, but the seed is very small, and as yet it is fairly expensive. But it would be a great component to have this in planted prairies as frequently as we see it in nice black soil remnant prairies. There are other muley grasses. There are about 11 species of them in Iowa itself, and some of them are very rare, and identifying them can be difficult. There's a lot of variation within a species that makes it sometimes difficult to distinguish between the species, and the taxonomy is kind of a mess. But habitat can help you. The grass on the left that was found in an eastern Iowa fen may be Muhlenbergia glomerata, while this one I'm just showing you at far right is Muhlenbergia cuspidata, a very densely tufted and fine-leaved grass of dry and rocky sites that you might even mistake for prairie dropseed at first glance, until you look very closely at that and you see it has those branched leafy stems that kind of characterize it as a Muhlenbergia. And there's our Muhlenbergia cuspidata. I haven't memorized the common name of that one, so I apologize for that. We do have a botany break. Does anybody have any questions? I see that somebody asked about the remnant prairie in Butler County, which is open to the public. Yes. And Andrew Olson got you a link to that. Thank you, Andy.
Hi, Laura. This is Ann.
Hi, Ann.
What is the rule of thumb with remnant prairies? Are they open to the public, or
that is an
do you
excellent
need
question.
permission to visit them?
Excellent question. If it depends. So a lot of it depends on the ownership of the site. If they are a county property or a state preserve, generally those are open to the public. They're not always super welcoming. They're not going to have, a lot of them won't have mowed or paved trails on them. If they're privately owned, you definitely do need to get permission to access those. And then some of them are owned by private nonprofit organizations, and they may make some of them open to the public and others not. So it's good to do your research on that. For instance, the Nature Conservancy owns some prairie sites in Iowa, so does Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation, and it would be good to look at their websites and ask for permission where needed. Good question. Thanks, Ann.
Thank you. Kim would like to know, how do you tell the difference between switchgrass and prairie dropseed?
Okay. Oh, great question. The first thing I would look at is just generally the size. Switchgrass is a much bigger plant. It also tends to grow in a larger kind of a patch-like growth rather than being a tight bunch. And another thing with switchgrass is that it's going to have more leaves up along the stem. And those leaves are going to be wider and proportionally shorter than prairie dropseed. So prairie dropseed is just this super, super tight little bunch. that fountain, the blonde wig dropped in the sand, that kind of thing is going to distinguish those pretty effectively. So vegetatively, there it's easier. It's also switchgrass also has a big open panicle, but the one of prairie dropseed is just more delicate and fine looking in general. So a lot of times it helps look at them side by side, but I think just by the size and you know, the fineness and bunchiness of the prairie dropseed will help you out. So I hope that answers your question, Kim. Okay, I think I'm going to get a sip of water and then we'll move on. Okay. Let's try keying another species. Here we go. And the one that we're aiming for here is another low tufty grass, but this one has wider, kind of more ribbon-like leaves that sort of curl back. And it has longer flower stems that sort of sprawl outward. So that is indicated by the kind of the orange ellipse here. Let's look at some of its characteristics, especially its vegetative characteristics first. On our plant number 2, the leaves are sort of crowded toward the base of the plant. They have very short internodes. The leaves are also quite wide. They're about 1/2 inch wide, and they may be gently wavy along their length. The ones that I've observed have many long hairs on their blades and their margins, but the degree of hairiness of these can be variable among populations or even individuals. So be careful with that trait. The other thing, another variable trait, but one that helps me find this plant is just their color. They sort of have a warm green color to me with a little bit of yellow in it. But this isn't, you know, it's variable and not a super trustworthy thing. The ligule in this case, seen over in the far right picture, right where the blade meets the stem, is a short membrane, which is backed by a fringe of very short hairs. But you can see the long hairs along the margins and even on the blade of that leaf on the right side. This inflorescence gets a little bit tricky when you're using it in the Brown and Elliman key, because it has 1 to 3 branches. So it can be difficult to decide when you're going through the key whether or not they come from one point. So I was sneaky here and I picked a specimen that had 3 branches. So you can see that they emerge from different points vertically along that stem. So that's going to simplify things when we look at the key. The spikelets on each of those branches are arranged in pairs. They're very tightly packed along one side of that flattened stem. And so you can see, well, one of the branches here is turned away from you, one turned towards you. So you can see that arrangement. Each spikelet itself looks a bit like a tiny split pea. It's flattened, almost cupped on the one side, and there is 1 fertile flower per spikelet. You can see on the right-hand picture, you can see the rusty colored stamens still exerted from a couple of these spikelets, and the kind of fuzzy, frothy purple stigmas that are still on some of them. Okay, so let's hit the Brown and Elliman key. This has a rounder 2-sided stem. The flower branches are arranged vertically along the stem. We talked about that because it has the 1 to 3 branches, and I was sneaky and picked the one with 3. The flowers are definitely lying tightly along the branch, and they're clearly on one side, so it doesn't meet the other characteristics at all. We're going the purple route. And if you follow that route, there are going to be 4 choices in Brown and Elliman. And the first one you would go to is Paspalum, which, it so happens, is what this is. This is slender beadgrass, or Paspalum psittaceum. It's also known as hairy lens grass, which, yeah, you know, if you think about the images that evokes, it doesn't sound comfortable. But anyway, I'm going to go with slender beadgrass because that sounds pretty and not uncomfortable. Other names can be thin paspalum or slender paspalum. The leaves itself are kind of bunchy and low, but the plant height can be up to 3 feet because the flower stalks can get pretty tall. And it grows and flowers, well, it grows throughout the summer and flowers from July to September. So you can find it right now, although I've noticed that some of the seeds are starting to shatter. This is a plant that grows in uplands and dry prairies and savannas with sparse vegetation. It's interesting, it's uncommon in north central Iowa, which is the area of the state where the landscape was the most recently glaciated. And so it has a lot bigger proportion of just really deep, rich black soil. The slender beadgrass is quite disturbance tolerant. We find it in places where there are abundant gopher mounds that have kind of tilled up the soil almost, or even alongside dry roadside remnants. And just a little plug for this, this happens to be one of the favorite grasses of my colleague Laura Jackson, who is to be observed in the right-hand picture there, admiring the inflorescences of this grass. The range of this species is a little bit interesting. You won't find any cousins of slender beadgrass in Iowa. So there's no other members of that genus here in Iowa. Simplifies the ID for you. But there are quite a few other species of Paspalum in the United States, and they particularly tend to range toward the southeast. So you can see that our slender beadgrass is also found all the way clear as south as the Gulf Coast. And there are a lot of other paspalums in those areas too. Slender beadgrass foliage is eaten by native herbivores like rabbits and bison, where they still exist, and also by diverse insects. The seeds are a great food source for grassland birds. And I couldn't find any other, besides maybe livestock eating it sometimes, I couldn't find any other human uses, but it's just cool. This is just a really neat grass. There is one potentially confusing lookalike around here. This was covered by Laura Jackson in a previous lecture. This is called woolly cupgrass. It's an introduced Eurasian species. It grows as an agricultural or roadside weed in Laura's garden. Its inflorescence looks superficially similar to slender beadgrass, but it often has more branches that tend to droop to one side of the stem, and the inflorescences themselves are covered in these soft woolly hairs. The spikelets are more pointed and they're not paired with each other as they are in slender beadgrass. So there's some kind of subtle differences, but yeah, get out there, look at them, and I think you will have no problem identifying them in the field. All right. The last grass, the last warm season grass I want to share with you today is prairie cordgrass, or Spartina pectinata. It has some other common names like slewgrass and freshwater cordgrass and ripgut, which is another name that doesn't sound very comfortable. And there's a reason for this, which we will talk about. This is a truly tall grass. The flowering stalks can get up to 8 feet high. And it's a sod former. So many of the grasses that we've talked about in this course have been bunch grasses, but this is one that kind of forms an expanding patch through its rhizomes that grow outward from the original clump. In the picture at the right, you can see the margin of a patch of prairie cordgrass that's expanding out into an area of smooth brome. And smooth brome is one of our kind of grasses non grata for tallgrass prairie or tallgrass prairie restoration. And here's one grass that that can hold its own against brome. The fruiting season, when prairie cordgrass does decide to flower and set fruit, is from August to October. If you look at the patch in the image there, I don't know if you can see any flowering stalks in that, but I can't. So one of the unique characteristics about this grass is its tendency to form a sod, and it's a very dense, matted, coarse sod because of this root system. So if you look at that picture, you can see the roots are themselves tough and fibrous, but the pointy things that look wicked are the rhizomes, and these things have that pointed end. They just kind of tunnel through the soil. It's an inexorable encroachment, and then that tip is a growing tip and can produce a new grass shoot at the end of it. So it's an amazing growth form, really. The leaves are about 1/2 inch wide. They're up to 36 inches long. They are glossy and shiny. And so this glossiness of the leaves just makes the patches of this grass stand out against the background. This is one of those where I can be driving along at 55 miles an hour on a county road and I say, oh, there's a patch of cordgrass. The ligule, if you have to look that closely to identify this grass, the ligule is there. It is a fringe of short hairs, but for the most part, the plant is otherwise devoid of things that feel like hair. On the other hand, the leaf blades and other parts have sharp tooth-like transparent spines. And these help give it the name of rip gut. This plant is an excellent, if not a very friendly, reminder that you should wear long pants and even sometimes long sleeves when exploring prairies. Oh, there's that ligule. Just I gotta look closely, find that tiny thing on that big grass. Okay, so going along with the theme of bigness, the inflorescence can have 5 to 50 branches arranged along 4 to 20 inches at the top of that 8-foot high stalk. Within each of those branches, the spikelets are tightly packed in 2 rows along that branch, and they are defended by tough-on glooms that have teeth. So you can see just with a little bit of magnification, these transparent jagged teeth that look like something you'd find in the skull of a dinosaur. These things are amazing. There is only 1 fertile floret per spikelet. And so here you can see a spikelet that's dissected. You can see the glooms kind of slightly pulled apart so you can see the flower within them. And there's kind of even a shriveled stigma and some of the anthers still attached. But I poked around at this floret and didn't feel anything that felt like an ovary. And that's kind of characteristic of this species. For something that's as well defended with spikes and teeth and all, what gets it are little tiny insects that end up eating those ovaries from the inside of the spikelet. Now, it sounds like a terribly sad thing that, gosh, this wonderful plant doesn't end up making much seed, but it doesn't make a huge difference to cordgrass populations in the wild because each of those stands or patches is quite long-lived, and it spreads underground by those tough, woody, sharp rhizomes. On the other hand, this also means that the seed is hard to come by and expensive, and therefore this species is not used very widely in plantings. Look for patches of this grass in wet soils, in ditches, in swales, in marshes, and sedge meadows. You may also find unexpected patches in upland prairies. Sometimes that hints at a higher water table in that area. Here you can really see the shininess of those leaves. Prairie cordgrass is found all over Iowa and this very broad swath of the central and northern United States. Prairie cordgrass found uses by Native Americans for roof thatching. Euro-American settlers found the dense roots and rhizomes were a very tough material that was useful for sod house construction. It's also, because of its size and the amount of biomass that it produces, it's an interesting potential biofuel source. And it is excellent erosion control. So you saw that around those rhizomes, there was these dense fibrous roots that would be excellent for holding soil. And it likes to live in wet places, so bottom of a ditch is a great spot. Numerous insects feed on its leaves, inside its stems, and even on its flowers. So I've been also very amused to see little tiny sweat bees feeding on the pollen of this presumably mostly wind pollinated species. The leafy patches themselves provide cover for wildlife, and muskrats will eat the roots. So let's look at, I know we've had 7 classes in Grasses for the Masses. You've met tons of new friends amongst those grasses. and a few frenemies, I guess, because we've met some non-native common and weedy grasses as well. But I want to highlight some of the native grasses of remnants and planted prairies that you've seen throughout the summer. Here's a dicanthelium from Justin's look at remnant prairies. Here's a June grass. There's a beautiful patch of blue joint grass. Here's needle and thread or porcupine grass, Calm's brome, and Elymus canadensis or Canada wild rye. Moving into the worm season, we have from today, Muhlenbergia racemosa or marsh muley, big blue stem from Christine's talk last week, purple love grass from today, from the remnants, little blue stem from Christine's talk about plantings. Here's our prairie drop seed, unmistakable. Bouteloua critipendula or Sidotes grama from Christine's talk. Our slender bead grass from today. Our prairie cordgrass. And finally, switchgrass. This one is just a mass of those panicles with frost on it in the winter. So I encourage you to get out and explore remnant prairies around you and restored prairies. You never know which friends you might meet, both human and of the grassy sort. I'd say, remember, there's that link to that I provided earlier to the Iowa Prairie Network. You can find the Find a Prairie page is under About Prairies, or you can just directly search for that. Let's say before you go, be prepared for things like sun, weather, the terrain. Remember, there's not a lot of paved trails in remnant prairies, and the critters you might encounter of the 6- and 8-legged varieties. And then try to see how many of the new friends that I listed on the previous slide that you find and recognize in a remnant or restored prairie. I've got a list here of some of my favorite sources of information on native prairie plants. If you want to go back to them later, but don't get a photo or scratch down a list right now, don't worry about that. This is being recorded and it'll be up on our website in a few weeks. And I'd be happy to make a PDF of the talk available to anybody who asks for it. My email is on the Tallgrass Prairie Center website, and I think also within the course materials. And with that, we will go to our cheesy concluding sunset slide. I want to thank you so much for joining us for all 7 sessions of Grasses for the Masses, or if this was your first one, we're so happy to have you on board. Please check out the recordings as they appear on the website. I think that Anne will be able to offer you also a link to a temporary link to the recording through the Google group or Facebook page after today's class. And I'll appreciate the wonderful comments in the chat and welcome your questions. We have actually quite a bit of time at the end of this class. I think I talked too fast. Please fire away with the questions. Will we be offering webinars during the fall and winter? We don't have plans for additional botany beginners type courses yet. There are some other excellent webinars coming up, like I know Trees Forever does the Stewards of the Beautiful Land, and I think they have one more session coming up soon. Any other questions? Anne, will the recordings be available next summer as well? Absolutely, yes, they will remain on our website in perpetuity. Recordings, this will be great. We'll be able to go back to this in 10 years and see what we looked like and sounded like when we were younger.
Hello, everyone, this is Anne. I will be sending out the link, your own temporary link to this video tomorrow, but once everything is closed captioned, which does take a couple weeks, we will put that on our website. We have, I think, the first 4 classes earlier this year on there already, but those will be there, and please access them, and please access the 2020 class that we had, because all those videos are up there as well, exploring Iowa's native plants.
Good points. Thank you, Anne. Yeah, if you like grasses for the masses, be sure to check out Botany Beginners, the 2020 version, and get lots of friends amongst the wildflowers as well. All right. Oh, you all, your comments are so kind. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you. When planting a prairie mix, there's a question: how soon should we see the grasses? Okay, this is a super good question. Depends on which grasses you mean. In the first year after you seed a prairie, likely you're going to see a lot of those grasses that we talked about in the lectures on more of the common weedy grasses. A lot of times it's annual warm season grasses that are heavily dominant in the first year of a planting. And a lot of times that's why we recommend establishment year mowing for prairie plantings. But if you look super closely, you'll often be able to see little seedlings in the first year of a planting. And depending on the conditions at planting time and throughout that first season, some of the warm season grasses may actually be flowering in their first year by August and September. So you might see your big blue stem, a few little blue stem. You might see some prairie dropseed and things like that flowering in the first year. So you won't see a lot that first year. The second year, your site will probably be dominated a lot with some of the native cool season grasses like Canada wild rye. And then gradually over time, the balance shifts, and you're going to see more of the kind of the big four prairie grasses. And you have to look closely for some of the rarer ones, and hopefully some of the rarer ones are included in your mix. I hope I answered that question fully. And
As Sherry's asking if they can. All of you can still post photos on for ID, and please do that. We would welcome that. You can either post them on Facebook. If you're on Facebook, it's Botany Beginners Exploring Iowa Native Plants, and then we do have the Botany Beginners Google group, which is a little more complicated. So whatever works out best for you. But please do post. We'd love to see your photos.
Yes, I agree. One of the things that I want to do, because I know that I'm able to get some of the close-up pictures of the florets and things because we have dissecting microscopes here in the building. But I know some people who get pretty decent, very close-up photographs with little clip-on lenses that go on their cell phone camera. And I'm really curious about using those to get some of those finer scale characteristics of the grasses. So I don't know, Sherry, if you do that, if you have the budget to get some of those lenses, let me know how they turn out. I might just spring for it and try it out myself, though. Looks like fun. Any other questions out there?
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Laura, for the wonderful photos.
Thank you. Glad to share.
And keep up with the Tallgrass Prairie Center on Facebook or Botany Beginners on Facebook. We'd love to see you there.
All right, thanks all. I think, Anne, if there aren't any more questions, we'll turn off the recording and hope to bump into some of you out in a remnant or restored prairie out there someday.
We have one last question we're going to take. Is the TPC open to the public?
Oh, the TPC is open on regular working days from 8 to 4 p.m. And the grounds around the Tallgrass Prairie Center have numerous trails that you can explore. They're part of the UNI campus and they are open to the public. We have a map that is on our website. So yeah, please come out and see us, sign our guest book, and pick up one of the trail maps and take yourself on an impromptu tour. If I'm available and have time, I would be happy to meet you. Just let me know that you were a participant in Botany Beginners or Grasses for the Masses, and I'll take you for a short tour around the place myself.
Thank you, Laura.
You're welcome.